Hey everybody, Brandon here. Most of you know me as Headbanger142 on YouTube or the Hardcore Kid on Reviewers Unknown. And with 2012 ending, so is my third season of my show, Hardcore Kids Movies. Ever since I started reviewing in 2009, I've uploaded 80 episodes, met a lot of other reviewers, and made a lot of fans. And trolls. But either way, I've had a lot of fun doing these reviews, and I'm going to keep doing them until I decide that I don't want to do the series anymore. You see, when I first started this show, I had just gotten out of high school. Nowadays, I go to college, I have a job, and I barely have enough time to put together any new material. So I don't know how long I have before I finally cancel the show, but I promise it won't be anytime soon. But before we can move on to our fourth season, I want to take a look back at some of my older reviews and pick out which movies that I have reviewed that I think are the best and the worst. They say the best always come first, so I'm going to start off with my top 5 best movies I've reviewed. Now, keep in mind, this is all my opinion, and if you disagree with some of the choices, well, then that's your opinion. So what are the best movies I've reviewed so far? Well, let's start with number 5. Codename Kids Next Door, Operation Zero. This is a really messed up movie. You have all these 10 to 12-year-old kids with a gigantic treehouse and a freaking space station fighting off a bunch of whacked-out adults in costumes, and you have this shadow person who transforms everybody into zombies and forces them to make tapioca pudding. Man, Cartoon Network sure had a lot of creativity back then. Nowadays, not as much. I think what makes the movie work is the tone it has. It's a lot darker than most of the episodes, and it pays tribute to a lot of those old horror zombie flicks with having all these characters turn into these raggedy, zombified entities, and it manages to have fun with it. A moment that I find really funny is the scene where number 3 and 4 are in the treehouse, and just when it looks like they're safe in the closet, Kooky gets infected, and she infects Wally by kissing him. How cute and yet quite disgusting. I had a lot of fun making the review. It's probably the first good one that I've made. Plus, it's the first one where I used my guitar gun, so it kinda set a benchmark for me in a way. And yes, I know number 362 is not number 1's girlfriend. Thanks for telling me 100 times, you pesky teenagers. While I'm not a huge fan of the show, I still say check the movie out. It's a lot of fun. Number 4, Wizards. I've always been a bit on and off when it comes to Ralph Bakshi. I hated Fritz the Cat, Lord of the Rings was a disjointed mess, and Cool World was just incomprehensible. However, Wizards always holds a soft spot for me. It's not really a masterpiece, but it does have a lot of interesting things to offer, like the whole war between magic and technology, the use of rotoscoping, and the representation of what Earth might look like millions of years from now. Now, one of the most important factors that I look for in movies is having characters that are likable. And, well, I do like the characters. Avatar is really funny, Eleanor is quite a head-turner, and Weehawk is a real badass. It's also cool to hear actors like Mark Hamill and David Proval playing small but noteworthy roles. Yeah, there's flaws, like the bad editing, recycled character designs, and the very anticlimactic confrontation between Avatar and Black Wolf. But keep in mind, Bakshi only made this movie with a budget of $1.5 million, so you really can't expect Walt Disney quality animation. Still, I think this is worth a watch, even if you're a Bakshi fan or not. Number 3. The Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline. I just couldn't choose one movie over the other, so I decided to tie them up. I've always loved Henry Selick's work, even before I knew who Henry Selick was. The Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach were two of my favorite movies as a kid. Now, in my review, I said how parents complained about The Nightmare Before Christmas being too scary for kids. Well, I was 6 when I first saw it, and I wasn't all that scared by it. Trust me, I've seen scarier. No, I actually thought it was more funny than scary, and that's supposed to be the idea. It has a scary atmosphere, but it's executed in a light-hearted and comedic way. Coraline is actually the opposite. I actually found myself genuinely scary by this, and this is coming from somebody who was still a senior in high school at the time of its release. I mean, you had these characters with buttons for eyes. You also have that dance scene with that fat, big-breasted woman, which was eye-rapingly disturbing. And then, of course, you have the other parents. Oh my lord, they were freaky enough to look at when you saw them in the first scenes, but towards the end you have the other father turn into this pumpkin creature who drowns in the pond, and then the other mother who turns into this spider lady and tries to catch Coraline in her web. These are easily some of the freakiest moments I think I've ever seen in these movies. But from a technical standpoint, both movies look great. The stop motion is smooth and colorful, and the characters are likable and interesting. The soundtracks are also great. Most of the songs in Nightmare Before Christmas are really catchy, although Kidnap the Sandy Claus I still consider my favorite, being how sadistic it is. Coraline also has a really good soundtrack. The main theme with the children chanting is really chilling. I've always wondered what kind of language the kids were speaking, but some people tell me it's just plain gibberish. Something wicked this way comes. Number 2. The Secret of NIMH, or as I like to call it, The Secret of NIMH. Yeah, my poor pronunciation skills aside, this is a beautifully animated and inspiring tale of a young mouse and her quest to save her family and her home. Being Don Bluth's first animated feature film, I thought this was a pretty strong debut. The premise is that originally a group of mice were brought to the National Institute of Mental Health, or NIMH, and were injected with a serum that made them intelligent. After one of the rats, Jonathan, died, his wife, Mrs. Brisby, was the one to fill the role of being the hero. Now, Mrs. Brisby is a character who may not look strong physically, but she is strong both mentally and emotionally. She's the one who has to take care of her family, including her sick son Timmy, and she's willing to keep them safe. That will helped give the amulet its power, thus saving her house and her family from the mud. Elizabeth Hartman gives a very sweet performance as the timid Mrs. Brisby, and it's a real shame that she ended up committing suicide only a few years after this movie's release. Although Justin is easily my favorite character. I know a lot of fans who like to pair him up with Mrs. Brisby, which actually makes sense, since in a way, a part of Jonathan lives in Justin. He's a natural leader who is just as willing to protect his people, including his late friend's family. Jenner is a villain who I think is highly underrated. A lot of movie villains are always planning on doing evil deeds that usually involve a person getting killed. And unlike many villains today, Jenner actually succeeds when he kills Nicodemus. That's pretty dark. Overall, The Secret of NIMH is an animated masterpiece and is essential for every cartoon lover's collection. And the number 1 best movie I've reviewed is Felidae. As I've stated many times in the past, I'm a cat person. In fact, I have a cat of my own. Unfortunately, it's often rare that I find a movie starring cats that I thoroughly enjoy. I mean, I like the Aristocats, I like Nocturna, and I like Puss in Boots. But Felidae is the movie that really stands out. It's a fascinating mystery thriller that revolves around a cat playing detective, investigating murders of other cats around his neighborhood. And believe me, these deaths are gory. In fact, with the exception of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, this is the goriest film I've ever reviewed. Maybe even gorier than the Nightmare films. Think about it. You have a blind cat getting decapitated, you have all these dead cat corpses on strings like marionettes, cats being electrocuted, and you even have a cat getting C-sected. What the fuck, man? That's just cruel. I do like the film's atmosphere. It's dark, menacing, and it leaves you wondering who may be the next victim and who the killer might actually be. The characters are all good too. Francis is very down-to-earth, while Bluebeard and Kong are a bunch of hams. And while many people complain about the English dub of foreign films being really bad and out of sync, I thought the version I had was fairly spot on. Overall, I absolutely love this movie. It's well drawn, well written, gory, and I'd like to thank Huey Toonmore for reviewing it with me, because this is easily one of the best movie reviews I've done, for the best movie I've reviewed. So that's it for my top 5 best movies I've reviewed. Stay tuned next time where I list the top 5 worst movies I've reviewed. Peace out, and Merry Christmas.